It's hard not to love botanical illustration, the bold colors, the structure of leaves and petals outlined with meticulous detail, the juxtaposition of different moments in the life of a plant coexisting like you could never really see it in nature. Botanical illustration entered its heyday during the 18th century as colonial explorations dramatically expanded the boundaries of the world. At that time, artists mostly complied with accepted aesthetic conventions, and the white, plain background was the norm in science. Then, one botanical artist broke all rules. Hi everybody, this is Giovanni Aloi. Welcome to the first episode of Artifact. At first glance, this looks like a pretty accurate botanical illustration, yet something is very different. The appearance of this image betrays the sheer creative originality behind its making and the truly remarkable artist who brought it to life. The 18th century was a tumultuous time in Europe and consequently to the rest of the world. The coal-propelled power of the Industrial Revolution generated instant fortunes, widespread poverty, plenty of suffering, and above all, the explosion of an unprecedented thirst for knowledge. The Enlightenment sought to rethink God, reason, and humanity from the standpoint of scientific certitude. The study of nature became, at this point, an essential quest to grasp the meaning of life on Earth, and with that, to potentially unlock the mystery of human life. In a world before photography, illustrating plants and animals was the only way to catalogue and organize the wondrous life forms discovered in faraway lands. The general public could not resist the spell of natural history. So between the end of the 18th century and the beginning of the Victorian era, an army of non-professional artists and craftsmen produced nature-inspired marvels, as it is the case for these flowers made up of shells, or compositions built with feathers, and even human hair. This work is among the earliest made by a non-professional scientific illustrator, but it is also one that will show how significant scientific contributions can come from anyone armed with determination, creative vision, and yes, talent. At first glance, what sets this work apart from the rest is the black background. It is unusual, and it makes the shapes and colors of leaves and flowers stand out. Closer inspection, however, might reveal that this is not an illustration made with watercolors and pencils, but that it's actually something altogether different. This is not a dried specimen of the kind we find in herbaria either. Herbaria were invented in Italy during the 16th century and contained pressed plants glued against white backgrounds. Dried leaves and petals tend to become translucent and discolor, so they need some backlit brightness to remain visible. That's always been the problem with herbaria. Once pressed, plants don't look always pretty. If you get a little closer, this work will disclose its secret. Its inventor called it a paper mosaic. So who was the inventor of this original new way of representing plants? Her name was Mary Delany, an English non-professional botanist and artist born in Charleston in 1700. Her passion for plants long predates this work. She was involved in the discussions surrounding Linnaean classification and loved to garden. Joseph Banks, a chief botanist at London's Kew Gardens who had travelled with Captain Cook, became a close friend of Delany and offered her the opportunity to study his collection of botanical art. But it wasn't until 1772 that Delany picked up scissors and glue to start her new creative adventure. The moment that changed her life came one afternoon when she noticed the striking similarity in tone and texture between the petal of a geranium and a piece of red paper on her bedside table. In the spur of the moment, she began to cut paper to resemble the petal as closely as possible. The result was so strikingly realistic that a friend who came to visit was totally fooled. That reaction motivated Delany to make this work and over the course of 10 years to produce an outstanding 984 more. The creative originality that makes Delany's work so important is linked to aspects of her life and the time in which she lived, but also to an imaginative creative moment of ingenuity led by playfulness and her ability to trust the intuition and run away with it. The moment she picked up the scissors to replicate the geranium petal, her creative drive was channeled into the project of a lifetime. Her perseverance and endurance made it happen. Like many other female artists, unfortunately, Mary Delany has been overlooked by scientific institutions, art historians and critics. Her work was not deemed important because it swayed too much from the tradition of science and also classical art, both male-dominated fields. The subject of her work, flowers, was also associated with femininity and thus considered less important and somewhat frivolous. She was a true outsider. But perhaps most of all, creative genius led Delany to accomplish something that very much irritated her contemporaries and that still annoy many today. She dared to blur the boundaries between two disciplines, in this case art and science, by producing extremely accurate and competent botanical representations through an unorthodox medium she invented herself. Her work therefore exudes a sense of irreverent independence that wasn't seen appropriate for women of her time. Delany's creativity and talent challenged the status quo, and it paved the way for more women artists to follow in her footsteps. And for good measure, she also tampered with the boundaries of art and craft, domains that were much more distinct back then. She pioneered the creative fluidity that will become more accepted only 150 years later when male artists like Matisse dare to do the same. Over 250 years after her death, Delany's work still stands as a resonant slap in the face of social, scientific and artistic norms and conventions. What she named paper mosaic would eventually be called collage, the artistic medium regularly associated with Picasso and Braque, the leaders of Cubism. They used the medium in their work starting from 1912, but while Picasso and Braque arrived at their conception of collage by exploring ideas of aesthetic fragmentation, multiple point perspective, and appropriating African art in the process, Delany's creativity was driven by her ability to detect the affinity between materials, to see the huge potential in the simplicity of a piece of paper next to a torn petal. She could see in the mundane the imprint of a creative promise, something that changed her life and that continues to impact the lives of those who see her work today. Delany was 72 when she began her first collage and completed her last only in 1783, 10 years later, when she stopped because her eyesight at that point began to fail. Her work is a source of endless fascination and inspiration. That someone without a long professional career behind them could, in the middle of an afternoon, invent a new artistic medium is a reminder that it truly is never too late to find your creative vein and to channel it with the uttermost intense and dedicated passion. It isn't just the beauty of the works or the artist's incredible skills, her age, or even the number of works she created over 10 years. These are all amazing factors, but what I find truly admirable is her ability to harness a creative moment into a life-changing journey. All of the 985 collages made by Delany are a tangible proof that creative moments can change life, that they can challenge norms, reinvent beauty, and subvert hierarchies. The power of these images transcends the value of scientific or artistic contribution and inspires every one of us to follow our creative intuition and to trust it, for as absurd as it might initially seem, if we persevere, our creative journey might lead somewhere someday. If you'd like to know more about the work and life of Mary Delany, I warmly recommend the beautifully written and well-illustrated book titled The Paper Garden by Molly Peacock, published by Bloomsbury in 2010. And to see all of the 985 paper mosaics by Mary Delany, visit the website of the British Museum in London, where the works are kept today. I hope you enjoyed the first episode of Artifact. If so, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for future episodes and notifications. Until then, keep being creative.